Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Leach, and today we're going to get into our reading of Lamb to the Slaughter. So we're going to be looking at part one. Our objectives today, we're going to interact with sources in meaningful ways, such as note-taking and annotating, free writing, or illustrating. So I highlighted note-taking and annotating because that's what I'm going to be showing you in this video. Additionally, we're going to make some inferences and use evidence to support our understanding. So I know you've been hearing about inferences ever since kindergarten, and it doesn't stop in seventh grade. We're going to keep on doing that. And our language objective is that you're going to speak about plot elements of a short story using sentence stems, and you're going to publish your sentence on Flipgrid. So that's going to happen a little bit later. So before we get started, you're going to need your copy of Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl, and that is going to be in the Google Classroom. So either a printed copy or a digital copy is fine. You're also going to need a copy of Finding Evidence as I Read Literature. And again, if you have a printed out copy, that works. And if you don't, you can take notes in Google Classroom, so that's fine. If you are working on paper, you will need a highlighter and a pen or pencil. So I know we already talked about the plot diagram, but I just wanted to show it to you one more time because we're going to use the plot diagram to help us make some decisions about how we take notes. So just a reminder that we've got exposition is at the beginning, rising action is when the problem gets worse and worse, the climax is when we figure out how the problem's going to get solved, and then falling action is the consequences, and the end is, or resolution is just the end. So and again, if you want to take a look at those terms really quickly and read them over or review them in your notes, you might want to pause the video just to do that. Okay, a couple other terms that you will want to be familiar with for this story are foreshadowing and suspense. So again, foreshadowing is when the author provides hints about what's going to happen, and suspense is when the reader starts to get really anxious or you anticipate what's going to happen. So, okay. So before we get going with reading the text, anytime you read a text, you should look it over first, what we call preview. So you look at the title, you look at any bold or italicized words, and you just kind of notice if there's anything interesting. So take a second and look at the story. And here's what it looks like on my end. We've got the title, Lamb to the Slaughter, and then I don't see, as I scroll through quickly, any italicized words or bold words or subheadings or anything like that. I feel like the pictures are really interesting. And so I'm kind of looking at those to see what I can kind of think about from the pictures. But as far as bolded words or anything like that, I don't see anything. So when I look at the title and I want to make a prediction, I know that a lamb is a cute little baby animal. And I looked up slaughter in the dictionary, and slaughter is when you kill animals for food. And so my prediction is that this story is going to have something about killing animals for food. So that's the kind of prediction I would make. I may or may not be right, so I guess we'll see. So now that we've kind of previewed the text, why don't we go ahead and get started with reading? So in your Finding Evidence as I Read Literature chart, for this beginning part of the story, I'm going to tell you what to highlight or I'm going to tell you what to write, just to kind of give you an idea of how to use this chart. And then as we move through the story, more and more that responsibility of deciding what to jot down is going to become yours. But at the beginning, I'm going to tell you. So for just paragraphs 1 to 3, I want you to highlight or circle or underline characters and setting. And the reason I picked those two are because the beginning of the story is the exposition, right? We've talked about that. And in the exposition, we know we get introduced to character, setting, and conflict. So as we read this beginning of the story, we're most likely going to find information about the characters, information about the setting, and then we may find out what the big problem is. So for now, just for paragraphs 1 through 3, we're only going to be paying attention to and looking for information about characters and setting. So here we go. I'm going to read paragraphs 1 to 3 out loud. I will not be reading the whole story to you, but at the beginning, like I said, we're going to do some things together. So here we go. The room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, the two table lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, two tall glasses, soda water, whiskey, fresh ice cubes in the thermos bucket. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she would glance up at the clock, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time when he would come. There was a slow, smiling air about her and about everything she did. The drop of the head as she bent over her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her 6th month with child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger, darker than before. And there's a picture of her bent over her sewing, and that's what their living room might look like. So when I think about what I want to jot down here about characters, the character, I know her name is Mary because in paragraph 2 it said that was her name. I can tell that she's married because it says that she was waiting for her husband to come home from work. I can tell that she's peaceful because it said that she was tranquil. It said her eyes were placid. And those words I know because I looked at the dictionary have mean peaceful. So she's really kind of chill. I also know that she's pregnant because it said that she was her 6th month with child. And the setting, I know it's a cozy room just from the description about the slow air and the light and how pretty it is. And I know it's evening because she's waiting for him to come home from work. And then I know it's the 1950s because that was when the story was written. And it kind of gets into a little bit later, and I have read the whole thing. So if you haven't written anything down yet for that first set of chunks, you may want to pause the video and jot something down. Additionally, if there's something else that you came up with, feel free to jot that as well. So you may want to pause. Okay, so we're going to get back into it and we're going to read paragraphs 4 through 7 and we're going to look for information about character. So here comes the story again. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside and the car door slamming, the footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as he came in. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello," he answered. She took his coat and hung it in the closet. Then she walked over and made the drinks, a strongish one for him, a weak one for herself. And soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he in the other opposite, holding the tall glass with both his hands, rocking it so the ice cubes tinkled against the side. For her, this was always a blissful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she, on her side, was content to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved to luxuriate in the presence of this man, and to feel, almost as a sunbather feels the sun, that warm male glow that came out of him to her when they were alone together. She loved him for the way he sat loosely in a chair, for the way he came in a door or moved slowly across the room with long strides. She loved the intent, far look in his eyes when they rested on her, the funny shape of the mouth, and especially the way he remained silent about his tiredness, sitting still with himself until the whiskey had taken some of it away. Oops. Okay, so now let's think about it. So I can think about some things about her. She definitely does nice things for the husband and she loves him. And then about him, I can tell he's punctual because it said that he comes home at the same time every day and he's quiet. He is not talking and he's just kind of looking with this faraway look. He doesn't seem as into her as she seems into him. At the beginning, paragraphs 1 to 3, I kind of got the idea that she likes her husband a lot. She's waiting for him to come home. She's excited. But then in paragraphs 4 to 7, it's like, whoa, She really loves him. It's like he's the sun and she's the sunflower. Like, whoa, this chick is obsessed. So that'll be super interesting to see what happens. So next, we're going to read paragraphs 8 to 19, so a bigger chunk, and we're going to look for information about characters, and we're going to see if we can find out what the big problem might be. There she is staring at him. He's like, okay. Tired, darling? Yes, he said, I'm tired. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drained it in one swallow, although there was still half of it, at least half of it left. She wasn't really watching him, but she knew what he had done because she heard the ice cubes falling back against the bottom of the empty glass when he lowered his arm. He paused a moment, leaning forward in the chair. Then he got up and went slowly over to fetch himself another. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was dark amber with the quantity of whiskey in it. Darling, shall I get your slippers? No. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink, and she could see little oily swirls in the liquid because it was so strong. I think it's a shame, she said, that when a policeman gets to be as senior as you, they keep him walking about on his feet all day long. He didn't answer, so she bent her head again and went on with her sewing. But each time he lifted the drink to his lips, she heard the ice cubes clinking against the side of the glass. Darling, she said, would you like me to get you some cheese? I haven't made any supper because it's Thursday. No, he said. If you're too tired to eat out, she went on, it's still not too late. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer, and you can have it right here and not even move out of the chair. Her eyes waited on him for an answer, a smile, a little nod, but he made no sign. Anyway, she went on, I'll get you some cheese and crackers first. I don't want it, he said. She moved uneasily in her chair, the large eyes still watching his face. But you must have supper. I can easily do it here. I'd like to do it. We can have lamb chops or pork, anything you want, everything in the freezer. Forget it, he said. But darling, you must eat. I'll fix it anyway, and then you can have it or not as you like. She stood up and placed her sewing on the table by the lamp. Sit down, he said. Just for a minute, sit down. It wasn't till then that she began to get frightened. Oh, snap. So in 8 to 19, we start to see that a problem that she is having is that she's trying to do all this stuff for him and he wants nothing to do with her. He keeps rejecting her, he keeps pushing back. And so she's trying to make him dinner and he says no. He's acting unusual. And so now she's getting a little bit scared. So we're going to read and we're going to see what happens in 20 to 24. Go on, he said. Sit down. She lowered herself back slowly into the chair, watching him all the time with those large, bewildered eyes. He had finished the second drink and was staring down into the glass, frowning. Listen, he said, I've got something to tell you. What is it, darling? What's the matter? He had become absolutely motionless, and he kept his head down so that the light from the lamp beside him fell across the upper part of his face, leaving the chin and mouth in shadow. She noticed there was a little muscle moving near the corner of his left eye. This is going to be a bit of a shock to you, I'm afraid, he said, but I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided the only thing to do is tell you right away. I hope you won't blame me too much. And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at most, and she sat very still through it all, watching him with a kind of dazed horror as he went further and further away from her with each word. So there it is, he added. And I know it's kind of a bad time to be telling you, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see you're looked after, but there needn't really be any fuss. I hope not, anyway. It wouldn't be very good for my job. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it, to reject it all. It occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't even spoken, that she herself had imagined the whole thing. Maybe if she went about her business and acted as though she hadn't been listening, then later, when she sort of woke up again, she might find none of it had ever happened. I'll get the supper, she managed to whisper, and this time he didn't stop her. Okay, So we're starting to get a sense of what a problem in the story might be, a conflict for Mary. So what I notice is that he says, I've got something to tell you. And she's dazed with horror, like she is freaking out. And then he tells her, I'll give you money, but I don't want it to be a big deal because I don't want it to be, it wouldn't be good for my job if it turns into a big deal. So here is the thing for y'all. I would like you to take a guess and jot what you think he told her because it doesn't say in the story. It never says what he told her. So I want you to guess and then you're going to drop that guess into the assignment in Google Classroom. And then we'll come back together for part 2 of the story. The suspense. You don't know what it is, and that's building tension. All right, signing off.